Something has shifted in how work takes shape.
Most people have felt it. Few have named it. The public conversation moves past it too quickly to describe what's actually happening underneath.
Prequel to the practice.
A slow look at the pattern before the pattern becomes obvious. Part 1 of 3.
It isn't loud. It isn't sudden. It shows up in small ways, at the edges of the day.
A report comes back from a colleague that sounds more polished than it used to. A younger person turns in a draft on Tuesday that used to take a week. A document that required the whole morning 3 years ago now takes about 15 minutes to start.
And the remaining time goes to a different kind of question altogether. Which angle is right, which thread to pull, which parts to cut.
Most people have felt it. Few have named it. And the public conversation moves past it too quickly to describe what's actually happening underneath.
The shift looks, at first, like another tool cycle. Another round of learning something new. Every decade or so, a new instrument arrives. The people who learn it early do well. The work continues.
That's the pattern most people are reaching for, to make sense of the current moment. It almost fits.
Almost, because under closer observation, something doesn't quite line up.
In earlier shifts, the system was defined. The commands were learnable. Once the new instrument was understood, the work became predictable again. A little faster, but recognizably the same kind of work.
This time, the structure isn't fixed.
The tools respond. But they don't fully explain themselves. The path isn't given. It has to form as you move. That's the part that's easy to miss. Consider what an ordinary working morning used to look like. A request comes in. A draft is needed by end of day. The person sits with it for the better part of the morning. Thinks about the structure. Builds the paragraphs. Produces a solid, professional document.
Good writing is what they're paid for. And the drafting was the visible part of the labor. A morning's work, closed laptop, small sense of accomplishment.
That morning is starting to look different. The draft takes 15 minutes now. The structure arrives almost before it's asked for. What's left in the rest of the morning is a different question entirely. Which angle does this need? Which framing lands? Which part shouldn't be there at all?
Work that used to be invisible, folded silently into the drafting, is now the visible part. And the person is noticing, somewhere in the back of the mind, that they're not quite sure what to call it.
It doesn't have a line item. It didn't have one before either, because the drafting used to absorb it.
Something similar is happening to the analyst who builds models and summaries. The model assembles faster now. The summary writes itself in a recognizable voice.
What used to be the technical craft, the expertise they prided themselves on, has become the starting point instead of the destination. And the quiet surprise is that colleagues have started coming to them more often than before. Not for the model itself. For which question to ask the data. For the intuition about what's probably buried in it.
They didn't know that was a skill until the other work shrank around it. When the structure isn't fixed, the familiar approaches start to miss in small ways.
The instinct, at first, is to do what worked last time. Gather the information. Find the correct way to use the tool. Learn the commands. Wait for the work to become predictable again, the way it always has.
But the familiar approaches don't quite land the way they used to. The correct way to use the tool isn't sitting on a page somewhere. None of the confident voices match each other exactly. None of them match what happens when the tool is actually used.
The friction isn't a problem with the person. It isn't a problem with the tool. It's a mismatch between an approach that worked in one kind of system and a different kind of system that rewards something else.
Under these conditions, without anyone instructing them to, people start behaving differently. Two tendencies begin to show up.
Some stabilize. They gather more information. They look for clearer instructions. They enroll in the course. They read the article. They wait for the picture to cohere before taking the next step. This is reasonable. Others start moving. Before the picture coheres. They begin with fragments, half an idea, a rough opening, a question they're not sure is the real question yet. They try things before fully understanding them. They shape what comes back.
At first, the difference between the two is small, almost invisible. Both start from similar uncertainty. Both are working in good faith. Both are producing something. But one is accumulating clarity. The other is accumulating movement.
The difference doesn't look like much in the first week. It doesn't look like much in the first month. Then, quietly, something starts to change.
The one gathering clarity ends up with an organized understanding. Notes, frameworks, a clearer sense of what the tool does. Useful, professional, recognizably complete.
The one moving ends up with something harder to describe. A feel for how the tool responds. A set of small patterns that haven't been written down anywhere, and couldn't be written down anywhere, because they formed through interaction rather than instruction.
Neither of them is wrong. But under newer conditions, when the system itself isn't fixed, and the path forms through engagement, the second pattern compounds in a way the first does not.
One becomes more structured over time. The other becomes more functional. Neither of them necessarily understands why.
This isn't specific to tools, or to the current moment. It shows up across a surprising number of places. In learning, in problem solving, in creative work. Some wait for the concept to be fully explained. Others begin with an incomplete concept and let the understanding form through the attempts.
It's an old pattern. Much older than the current tools. The only thing that has changed is whether it has leverage.
Underneath this divergence is a specific structure, not a mystery. Something most people have not had a reason to look at directly.
The interior shape of what a person actually carries. The way a working life decomposes into its components. The ordinary conditions that keep both of these from being visible, even to the person living them.
These structures are not hidden, they are overlooked. The way the corona of the sun is overlooked at noon. Different conditions are required to see them.
Nothing about this is urgent. There's no moment coming when the shift will suddenly become obvious to everyone at once. That's not how this kind of change moves. It moves through small adjustments, 1,000 of them, each one easy to ignore.
Not because of urgency, because of weather. The person who sees the sky darkening while the light is still pale has time to prepare. The person who waits for the rain isn't lost. They're just wetter than they needed to be.
This is the first of three. What follows uses small instruments to look directly at what this one has only named from a distance.
For now, what's here is a recognition. The difference is forming, not fully visible yet. Not dramatic, not loud, but already shaping outcomes in the quiet spaces where the shift is actually happening.
Something has shifted in how work takes shape. The pattern is becoming visible to the people who are watching for it.
The camera moves closer now.
Same phenomenon. Different altitude. Close enough, this time, to see what ordinary conditions usually keep hidden.
Up close.
Through the serendipity lens. Part 2 of 3.
There is a specific kind of thing a person can do under some conditions that the same person cannot do under other conditions. Nothing about the person has changed between the conditions.
The same mind. The same accumulated experience. The same formation. One set of circumstances, the mind produces ordinary output. Another, something arrives that neither the person nor anyone watching could have predicted, and it turns out to have been available the whole time.
Ordinary working life is not one of the configurations that reaches the deeper capability. It is not designed to. It is designed to produce reliable output from predictable inputs. which is what it does well.
The deeper layer stays beneath the surface, visible only when something specific happens. A real emergency. A genuine encounter with something that matters. A stretch of unexpected freedom. And by the time those conditions arrive, it's too late to prepare for them.
So a question arises. Is there a way to see what ordinary conditions make invisible, without having to wait for the rare conditions that would reveal it naturally?
There is, actually, a small way. Not a permanent solution. A brief instrument, put on for the span of a particular kind of looking, then taken off. What it reveals during the brief look stays visible in a quieter way afterward.
Think of a solar eclipse. During ordinary daylight, the sun illuminates everything. And in doing so, it overwhelms the fainter things, the corona around it, the background stars. These things are there. They cannot be seen because the primary source of light is too strong.
During an eclipse, the sun briefly becomes its own blocker. The brightness drops. And what was invisible becomes, for a few minutes, visible. Not because anything was hidden. Because the brightness of ordinary conditions had been the obstacle.
Some observations about working life behave the same way. The brightest parts, the deliverables, the deadlines, the measurable output, illuminate everything around them so thoroughly that the fainter structure stays hidden. They are there. They are being overwhelmed.
The serendipity lens is a way of briefly dimming the brightness so the deeper patterns become visible.
Similar in function to the polarized filter used for watching an eclipse directly. The black polymer film, the aluminized mylar, or the polarized filters in 3D glasses that let two overlapping signals be pulled apart.
The lens does not add anything. It subtracts. It removes the overwhelming signal so the subtle signal underneath can be registered. People carry an interior layer that their ordinary work does not draw on. Not deliberately hidden. Simply not reached by the conditions of most working days. Built across years of attention to material that did not have a specific use at the time.
Most institutions cannot measure this layer. Schools measure acquisition. Employers measure performance. Credentials measure demonstration against fixed criteria. None of these measurements reach the interior structure.
Through the lens, the interior layer has shape. Not a warehouse of facts. Something more like a lattice, interconnected fragments of recognition, each one linked to others, forming a structure the person themselves cannot quite map.
The lattice grows in two directions. Vertically, as more material accumulates in any given area. Laterally, as connections form between areas the person never consciously connected. Only the vertical growth shows up on anything the outside world measures.
The lateral growth is where the more interesting capability lives. A person with a tall, narrow column of expertise can do their specific thing well, inside the frame the specialty provides. A person with a laterally connected lattice can do things that cross frames. Let me tell you about someone. A real professional. 6 months ago, they started to notice something odd. Colleagues were coming to them. More often than before. But not for the kind of help they'd always been known for. They used to come for the finished product. The draft. The analysis. The technical work. Now they were coming to ask which question to raise in the meeting. Which angle would land. Which thing shouldn't be said out loud. They didn't know, at first, what to call what they were being asked for. They thought it was their experience. But other people had experience too, and people weren't asking them. It was something else.
What they were being asked for was the lateral structure, the lattice, the interior layer that had been building across decades of reading they didn't think was work, conversations that went somewhere unexpected, the specific way their mind connected things.
They had been carrying it the whole time. What changed was that the new conditions of their work had started to ask for it. And once the asking began, the carrying became visible.
Most people assume that to operate well in any area, comprehensive knowledge is required. You have to know the field. Until that threshold is reached, the sensible thing is to keep preparing.
This assumption is almost always mistaken. Under real conditions, a few precise anchors combined with real attention are almost always enough. The comprehensive knowledge would be nice. It is rarely what the situation is asking for.
Through the lens, a precise anchor is not a memorized fact. It is a place in the interior lattice where the person can stand firmly while reaching for what they do not yet have. One well-held concept, followed forward through a specific question, produces more than a vague comprehensive survey produces.
This structure shows up across unrelated situations. Someone handling an emergency operates from 2 or 3 instincts they trust. Someone in immersive language learning speaks from a small set of reliable phrases and lets conversation supply the rest. Same underlying mode. The only accurate measurement of what a person is actually capable of happens under real conditions. Artificial exercises, tests, rehearsals, they all produce outputs, and the outputs feel like evidence. They are not evidence of capability. They are evidence of what the person can do when nothing is actually at stake.
Real conditions draw on the interior layer in a way artificial conditions cannot. The layer was built for moments that could not be anticipated. When anticipation is removed, the layer activates in ways that cannot be rehearsed into existence.
Which means most people spend most of their working lives in conditions that never ask for their real capability. They form impressions of themselves based on their ordinary output. The ceiling they have observed is the ceiling of ordinary conditions, not the ceiling of the person.
The self-assessment most people carry, what they are capable of, what their ceiling is almost certainly an underestimate, not of possibility, of what is already there, waiting for conditions that would draw on it.
There are 2 kinds of mastery. Most public conversation about mastery confuses them. One is optimized for visible demonstration, doing the impressive thing when watched. The other is optimized for availability, being able to do the needed thing when conditions require it, whether anyone is watching or not.
Performance-oriented mastery builds toward a known audience and a known moment. Unstructured time gets converted into visible output. Availability-oriented mastery builds without a known audience or moment. Unstructured time gets used for absorption rather than output.
Almost every institutional structure rewards the first. The interior layer is built by the second. Protecting the second from the pressure to perform is one of the quieter disciplines of a life that eventually produces more than the ordinary conditions would have predicted.
This film has used one small instrument, methodically. The lens dims the overwhelming brightness of ordinary output, so the quieter structure becomes visible. What it reveals is a layer almost everyone carries, built during parts of life that do not look like work.
Containing more capability than ordinary conditions ever ask for. The next film takes the camera wider. Pulls back to the scale of time. What compounds when the interior layer gets drawn on over years?
That silhouette is harder to see than the interior layer. Because the silhouette is composite, what a person experiences as their working life is actually several distinct things fused into a single felt impression.
For that, the lens alone is not enough. A second instrument becomes necessary. The next film introduces it. For now, the lens is back in its case. What it briefly made visible is already yours, in a quieter way, than it was 10 minutes ago. Not a technique. A noticing.
The next time ordinary working life offers a moment that feels routine, the noticing may be enough. The camera pulls back now.
Same phenomenon. Wider view. Far enough back, this time, to see the shape of a whole working life.
Wide angle.
What compounds, and the second instrument needed to see it. Part 3 of 3.
The previous film was close-up, interior layer, absorption rules, anchors, real conditions, 2 masteries. Everything observed at the scale of one person's interior architecture.
This one pulls back to the scale of time. What happens over years? What accumulates when the interior layer gets drawn on repeatedly? What the shape of a working life becomes when the mode has been running long enough to settle in?
At this wider altitude, a specific observation becomes available. The silhouette of a leveraged working life is different from the silhouette of an ordinary working life. Most people never get to see this silhouette clearly. Not because it is hidden, because it is composite.
What a person experiences as their working life is not one thing. It is several distinct things fused into a single felt impression. The impression is usually of effort, grind, labor. That impression is real. It is also incomplete.
The single word work has been doing the job of at least 5 different words, and the fusion is what keeps the silhouette invisible.
To see the silhouette, the fusion has to be separated. The serendipity lens dims overwhelming brightness so quiet structure can be seen. That is one kind of seeing. It does not separate composite material into components. For that, a different instrument is needed. A prism. When white light passes through it, the light separates into its component colors. The colors were there the whole time. Ordinary light is composite, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, fused into a single impression of brightness.
The prism does not add anything to the light. It takes advantage of the fact that different wavelengths bend at different angles and lets the composite pass through in a way that reveals its actual structure.
A working life, passed through the prism, separates into at least 5 distinct bands. Each one has its own character. Each one feels different from inside. They have always been there, fused together in ordinary perception.
The first band, low-level production, the drafts, the memos, the spreadsheets, the routine artifacts. Mechanical work, historically the largest band in most working lives. Under current instruments, this band shrinks dramatically.
The second band. Context juggling. Managing the text files, the session prep, the working memory, the instruments need to be useful. This band is new. It did not exist a few years ago. Keeping handoffs clean between sessions. This is not flow. This is structured labor of a different kind than what came before. And it has honest friction.
The third band, direction choosing. Which angle, which fragment, which cut, which layer of an instrument is right for this moment. These decisions were always happening, folded inside ordinary production. When production shrinks, they become visible. They feel lighter than labor, but heavier in consequence.
The fourth band. Sustained engagement. The long sessions where the work is doing itself through the practitioner. Where the arc from fragment to built thing is running. In a working life calibrated to the new conditions, it becomes the largest band.
The fifth band, the ungoverned time. Reading without assignment, walking without destination, the conversation without agenda. It does not look like work from outside. It does not feel like labor from inside. It is the band in which the interior layer is built. Without it, the other bands flatten. With it, they compound. Now that the bands have been separated, a new observation becomes possible. The silhouette of a working life is not a feeling or a mood. It is a specific, observable thing. The proportions of the 5 bands in a given life over a given stretch of time.
2 people can spend the same number of hours at their desks and live inside completely different silhouettes, because the proportions of their bands are completely different. Through the lens, the silhouette of an ordinary working life is heavy in low-level production. Most hours are in the first band. Direction choosing shows up occasionally, folded inside. Sustained engagement is thin or absent. The ungoverned time is protected fitfully.
The silhouette of a leveraged working life is differently proportioned. The first band is small. The second is present, with its honest friction. The third is clearly visible as its own work. The fourth is the largest. The fifth is protected and regular.
Same person. Same work. Same approximate hours. Different silhouette, because different proportions.
Moving from one silhouette to the other is not a transformation. It is a proportional rebalancing. The bands are present in both. What changes is how much time each one occupies.
Most people's habits around work have been formed by decades of living inside the ordinary silhouette. The body knows that work is grind because the body has felt grind for years. The nervous system has learned it. The sense of what a productive day feels like has been calibrated to the exhaustion of the first band.
When the conditions shift, when the first band starts to shrink, when stretches of the day no longer feel like labor, the body keeps expecting the old feeling, and a reflex arrives.
This cannot be right. If the work were real, it would feel harder. I must not be doing enough.
This is the too good to be true reflex, predictable, automatic, very hard to overcome by willpower. It is not a thought. It is a reflex calibrated over years, and it causes people to sabotage the leveraged silhouette in specific ways.
They add unnecessary complexity to processes that have become simple. They stay late to produce the visible exhaustion their identity expects. None of this is conscious. All of it is a response to the unfamiliarity of the new silhouette.
Both instruments now. The lens dims the overwhelming brightness of the old habits, so the reflex becomes visible as a reflex, not as reality. The prism separates the composite so the practitioner can see which band they are actually in. Together, the unlearning becomes achievable without willpower.
The practitioner is in the middle of sustained engagement. The fourth band, flow. The work is unfolding. It does not feel like labor. The reflex arrives. This is too easy. Something must be wrong. I should be struggling more.
With the instruments, the practitioner can name what is happening. I am in the fourth band. The fourth band is supposed to feel like this. The lightness is not a problem. It is the correct signal for this band.
Or the practitioner is in the second band. Context juggling. The tedious management of what the instruments need. A different reflex arrives. This should be easier by now. The leverage life was supposed to eliminate this.
With the instruments, the response is simple. I am in the second band. Second bands have friction. The friction is not a failure of the mode. It is one of the bands the mode contains.
Moving from the ordinary silhouette to the leverage silhouette does not happen quickly. There is a period, often months, sometimes a year or more, during which the bands rebalance unevenly and the experience of work can feel disorienting. The first band shrinks before the third band becomes visible enough to take its place. The fourth band appears in brief stretches that do not yet connect. The fifth band feels strange to protect when the first band is no longer filling the day.
During this period, work can feel purposeless at times. Not because it is, because the person's sense of purpose had been anchored in the visible labor of the first band, and that anchor is being removed without an immediate replacement.
3 honest observations. It is not efficient. It cannot be rushed. But it does end. People who come through usually describe the stable state as quieter, steadier, and more interesting than anything they experienced before.
3 films now. The first described the weather of the shift. The second used the lens to look closely at the interior layer people carry. This one added the prism and separated the composite of work into its 5 bands.
What the instruments reveal, together, is this. Almost everyone carries an interior layer built across their whole working life. That layer has been producing more capability than ordinary conditions have been asking of it. The shift in the weather is beginning to reward exactly the kind of capability the interior layer contains.
A silhouette of a differently proportioned working life is available. Not a fantasy. A real rebalancing of bands most working lives already contain. The endpoint is a working life with more flow, more consequential decision-making, less low-level labor, honest friction where friction belongs, and a protected relationship with the ungoverned time.
Nothing in any of this is a technique. Nothing is a certainty. The reader will go back to their life, try a few things slightly differently, watch what happens. Most attempts will feel inconclusive. After enough iterations, an epiphany may arrive. Usually not during work. Usually in transit or walking or just after waking.
After that, the mode runs on its own momentum.
For the practitioner who wants to see what this mode looks like specifically applied to current AI instruments, there is a 3-essay series that follows. 1 Practitioner's version. The moves. The routing across different tools. The session that reaches sufficient depth to produce something real.
Available, not required. The prequels stand on their own. The 3 essays extend the picture into specific methodology for the reader who wants to see what it actually looks like to run this mode on the current tools.
Both instruments are in their cases now. What they made visible is yours. The looking was the point.